What if suddenly, in the middle of our hyper-connected world of social media, glowing skyscrapers orbiting satellites and self-driving cars, a devastating announcement shook humanity? Relentless rains will fall upon the earth, swallowing nations, drowning empires, erasing in weeks what took millennia to build. Would you believe it? Or laugh, the way people laughed at Noah as he hammered wood into an ark? Genesis tells of a world consumed by corruption, violence, and arrogance. God's verdict, a flood to wash evil away. Only Noah found favor. Only his family was saved. Now imagine that scene playing out in 2025 in the digital age, with billions connected in real time. Who would survive? Look around. Endless wars, political corruption, moral decay, hatred disguised as freedom, science promising to build artificial gods of code, religion twisted into business, families collapsing, youth enslaved by digital addictions. How many today would dare to build an ark amid ridicule? How many would endure being mocked, cancelled, persecuted, simply for believing? Picture it. Entire megacities underwater, modern fossils, New York, Tokyo, São Paulo, Dubai, all swallowed in days. Nuclear submarines adrift, silent satellites watching as Earth drowns, governments scrambling to build technological arks, secret bunkers, desperate space colonies. But could science ever save the human soul? Would you have a place in those shelters, or be left outside, begging for a lifeline? The question cuts because it's personal. Who would you be, the scoffer, the indifferent one, or the outcast who still dares to believe? Maybe Noah's flood wasn't just history, but a pattern, a warning that repeats. A modern deluge might not come as water, but as social collapse, climate catastrophe, nuclear war, or runaway technology. Different form, same essence. Humanity forced to face its limits. This video is an invitation to explore that possibility, to ask what a new flood would mean today, who would be chosen, who left behind, and how faith, science, politics, and spirituality would face the ultimate judgment. If you have the courage to face questions others avoid, subscribe now. What comes next may shake your certainties, and maybe that's exactly what you need. Before we imagine a flood in 2025, we must return to the first great catastrophe of humankind. Genesis paints a world drowning in violence, corruption, and arrogance. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Genesis 6:5. Faced with a planet in moral collapse, God acted. The flood was more than water. It was a reset, a judgment and a warning. Out of millions, only one family survived. Noah's Ark was not just wood and pitch. It was a symbol that faith and obedience can preserve life even when the world mocks. Now imagine, if such judgment came again in our age, who would be invited aboard? Who would be left behind? Our world is advanced but hollow. Wars fought with drones and nukes, corruption infecting both parliaments and pulpits, truth traded for propaganda. Humanity has built towers taller than Babel, yet forgot the foundation. Picture 2025, environmental collapse, pandemics, arrogance of a species that thinks it no longer needs God. News of a coming flood spreads. Scientists crunch numbers, governments scramble, but few ask the real question: what is the state of our soul? Perhaps the flood has already begun, not of water, but of symbols. Consumerism is a flood swallowing identities, polarization a tsunami tearing families apart, mental despair a storm dragging millions under. And if you are still here reading these words, it means you are searching. That search itself is a plank of the ark. Perhaps you are already building it, not of wood, but of choices, of faith, of resistance to chaos. But before we move further, we must ask, what historical and scientific evidence exists for a global flood? Was it mere myth or a suppressed reality that could happen again, even more devastatingly? Picture this. The year is 2025, At first, it's just a weather report. Meteorologists warn of unusual rains, storms that don't seem to end. People laugh it off as hype. Life goes on, stadiums packed, selfies under umbrellas. But days turn to weeks. The sky darkens into permanent grey. Oceans push inland, dams collapse. With every update, more nations declare emergencies. The countdown has begun. In Noah's day, he built an ark under mockery. Today, who would dare? Churches would split, some proclaiming judgment, others dismissing it as just another crisis. Scientists would scramble for explanations. Extreme climate change, a cosmic shift, solar anomalies. Conspiracy theorists would flood the internet. The flood is back. Social media would erupt. Faith versus science versus fear. Governments rush to engineer mega dams, underground bunkers, floating cities. Billionaires compete for seats on rushed space missions. Yet while the elite hide, billions face rising waters, hunger, chaos. Supermarkets stripped bare, streets turned into rivers of panic, civilization unravels in real time. And what of religious leaders? Some mocked for saying it's God's judgment. Others, desperate for attention, claim exclusive visions of who will be saved. But the message would echo Noah's: repent, build your inner ark, for the waters are already rising. Now close your eyes. Rio's Christ the Redeemer swallowed by waves. The Statue of Liberty disappearing into the Atlantic. Arabian deserts turned to seas. Satellites broadcasting humanity's drowning in silence. And scattered among the ruins, small groups of believers clinging to hope. The truth: if the flood struck today, survival wouldn't just be physical, it would be spiritual. The deciding factor wouldn't be wealth, status, or power. It would be the same question as before. Who will hear God's voice while the world laughs? If this vision shakes you, know this: the next blocks dive even deeper. Stay with us. This journey isn't entertainment, it's a summons. If the flood was just myth, why do so many cultures across the globe tell the same story? That is the first question any honest investigator must face. Long before modern archaeology, civilizations everywhere spoke of a great deluge that wiped out humanity. From the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia to Mayan and Aztec traditions, from Greek myths of Deucalion and Pyrrha to Chinese tales of Yu the Great, from Native Americans to African tribes, the pattern is the same. Corruption, destruction by water, a chosen few who survived. Coincidence? Or fragments of a real memory? In 1872, George Smith uncovered the Gilgamesh tablets. There, a man is warned by the gods of a coming flood, told to build a massive boat to save his family and animals. The parallels with Genesis are unmistakable. Did the Bible borrow, or are both preserving a shared historical truth? Evidence doesn't end with myths. Geologists have uncovered sediment layers pointing to catastrophic floods. The Black Sea reveals signs of a massive inundation 7,500 years ago. In the Andes and Himalayas, marine fossils rest on mountaintops as if oceans once drowned mountains. Scientists point to ice ages and tectonics, but the echoes remain. And then there's the Ark itself. Throughout the 20th century, expeditions reported petrified wood high on Mount Ararat. Aerial photos, satellite images, explorers' testimonies, all suggesting something colossal frozen in ice. Yet access is restricted, findings classified, skeptics loud. Why? Because confirmation would shatter the myth versus history debate. Faith and science would collide, and neither would be the same. Interests, reputations, institutions would tremble. Easier to bury the evidence. So we must ask, if so many cultures share the story, if the Earth's rocks and fossils echo it, and if governments still suppress findings, what truth is too dangerous to reveal? And this is only the beginning. In the next chapter, we'll dive into conspiracies and deliberate suppression, because maybe the flood's true story has never been told. If so many cultures echo the flood, If fossils and sediments point to cataclysmic waters, and if expeditions to Mount Ararat keep finding traces of a massive vessel, why does the mainstream still call it myth? The answer may not be lack of evidence, but too many reasons to hide it. History is littered with sealed documents, classified files, discoveries buried under inconvenience. Did you know the Vatican holds apocryphal manuscripts describing parallel floods locked away from the public? That Cold War expeditions by the US and Soviets over Ararat produced classified reports never fully released. Coincidence or control? Governments fear the fallout. Imagine the headline, Noah's Ark found. Entire scientific models would need rewriting, religious systems would lose their monopoly, political power would tremble. Better to suppress, ridicule, or bury. The academic world plays along. Scholars who argued for the flood's historicity lost careers, reputations, grants. Major universities hold fragments of tablets and inscriptions pointing to the flood story, yet rarely publish them. It's as if a silent agreement keeps the flood filed under myth, never history. Why? Because to admit the flood happened is to admit divine judgment happened, that it wasn't metaphor but reality and could happen again. That's the terror. The pattern is clear. Anomalies are dismissed. Marine fossils on mountains, geology glitch, global sediments, coincidence, Ararat expeditions, collective hallucination, anything to keep the official version safe. But here's the chilling thought. What if the secret files hold more than flood evidence? What if they contain timelines, warnings, predictions of cycles yet to return? Perhaps we're not talking about the past at all, but a script waiting to play again. If you're still with us, you're part of those who refuse easy answers. But the next chapter is darker, how the signs of the ancient flood echo today, and why the waters may already be rising. What if I told you the flood has already begun and you didn't notice? Not of rain, but of invisible waves drowning civilization. Consumerism is a torrent devouring identity. Depression and anxiety are silent tides pulling millions under. The WHO reports nearly 1 billion worldwide suffer mental disorders. Political polarization is a tsunami splitting families and nations. Violence floods our streets daily. A modern flood doesn't need water. It already drowns us in moral, social, and spiritual chaos. Just as in Noah's day, people mocked the warnings. Then they laughed at his ark. Today we laugh through memes, distracted by viral dances, while wildfires, floods, and climate collapse wipe out entire cities. The UN confirms the last 8 years were the hottest on record. Heat waves kill thousands. Yet we shrug it off. Technology is its own deluge. We're chained to networks that promise freedom but breed addiction and despair. Social media, meant to unite, has become arenas of envy, outrage, manipulation. Each notification a drop feeding the flood of dissatisfaction. Never so connected, never so lonely, and still voices who warn are dismissed. Judgment talk is fanaticism, calls for conscience are ridiculed, but the pattern repeats. When people say peace and safety, destruction comes. If 2025's flood is spiritual, who survives? Who has built an inner ark strong enough to withstand the waters of anxiety, emptiness, despair? Perhaps the judgment is already here, and the ark is not wood, but faith, hope, resilience. If you're still here, you're among those searching for refuge. But the next chapter is vital. Not only the waters that destroy, but the doors that lead to salvation. When we picture Noah's flood, our minds fix on chaos, rising waters, drowning cities, terrified crowds. But we miss the crucial truth. The ark was built long before the storm. Noah didn't wait for the skies to break. He obeyed while the world mocked. That's the secret. Salvation is built in advance. If a 2025 flood were announced, humanity's instinct would be quick fixes, dams, bunkers, rockets to Mars. Yet none of these, preserve the soul. The question is not, where would you hide, but who would you trust? Noah was saved not by engineering, but by faith. The ark wasn't just timber, it was obedience embodied. Our age too is surrounded by invisible floods, anxiety, addictions, violence, collapsing systems. What saves us? Building an inner ark, cultivating values, strengthening faith, reconnecting with what matters most. Not retreat, but preparation, spiritual, moral, emotional. Science can forecast but not give hope. Politics can build shelters but not restore hearts. Technology can erect barriers but not silence death's fear. Only what we've neglected, faith, character, community, can hold. If you're still with us, you've already stepped beyond the crowd. Seeking these answers is itself a plank in your ark. Perhaps you didn't notice, but you've begun building. Think a physical flood today would spare few, but the spiritual flood is already here, and the ark's door remains open. Not wood and pitch, but choices, faith, resilience. And now we approach the climax. In the next chapter, emotions will break like waves. Fear against faith, mockery against hope. The moment where every heart must choose, sink or step inside the ark. We've reached the breaking point. Picture the skies split with endless thunder, torrents pounding the earth with fury. It's 2025 and humanity watches in disbelief. Screens broadcast until the power dies. Cities swallowed whole. Crowds run, but there is nowhere left to run. The laughter of mockers turns into choking screams. Those who mocked Noah now beg for a plank of rescue. This is the climax, faith versus disbelief. As millions struggle, a few stand firm, not stronger but prepared, trusting long before the storm began. The ark was never just wood, it was always spiritual. The real refuge is invisible, found only by those who dared to believe. The scene is unbearable. Mothers clutch children, elders cry for mercy. Youth scream into the void, social feeds overflow. Is this the end? Can we be saved? God, if your real answer. Humanity, once proud master of destiny, now kneels in despair, and still the rain falls. Yet hidden in the chaos, memories awaken, verses recalled, warnings once ignored. Words that once seemed foolish now burn with truth, and realization strikes too late. Mockery was the deadliest sin. This is not just a flood of water, but a flood of the heart. Panic versus hope, doubt versus faith. Even the hardened skeptic feels something greater. When the waters rise, there are no atheists, and if you're reading this, you are not drowning yet. You stand before the choice. Perhaps your ark is already taking shape, each search for truth, another nail driven into salvation's frame. But the storm hasn't peaked. Next chapter, we cross from despair into revelation. For when all seems lost, that is when the impossible arrives. The world is drowning in darkness. The roar of water deafens. Human screams echo in despair. It is 2025, and civilization has reached its breaking point. Every second lives are swallowed. Yet in that abyss, when all seems lost, something unexpected happens. Revelation. Noah once saw God shut the ark's door. Now, amidst the chaos, millions realize they were never alone. Between thunder and tears, an unseen presence becomes undeniable. Not helicopters, not technology, not science, but something greater. Many weep, not from terror, but repentance. Others feel sudden hope, realizing the flood was never only about destruction, but rebirth. The true climax isn't cities drowning, but souls awakening. People who never prayed cry out. Proud leaders kneel. Youth who mocked post their final words, "Lord, remember me." Some report visions, mysterious lights, inner voices, verses surfacing like thunder from heaven. The weeping is global. Too late for some, but for others, peace blooms. A peace born not from survival, but from surrender. The flood's apex is not just the end of an age, but the revelation that life was never ours, but God's. If you're still here reading, it means the revelation has touched you too. This is no accident. You are among those willing to hear what others dismiss. But the storm's peak cannot last forever. Next chapter, we descend from pain to reflection, from despair to calm. The pre-finale is coming, preparing us for the epic end. Storms don't last forever. After the deafening roar, silence falls. A silence almost heavier than the flood itself. Waters still blanket vast lands, but the world is altered. Neon-lit cities lie drowned in shadows. Towers of glass and steel now rest as ruins beneath the tide. The planet breathes differently, as if baptized by pain. And in this silence, reflection begins. What remains of humanity? Survivors realize salvation was never wealth, power, or technology, but something deeper. They no longer ask, "What do I own?" but "Who am I, and why was I spared?" The flood reveals that true treasure is carried within, not accumulated outside. Noah's first act after stepping off the ark was to build an altar. Worship came before rebuilding, gratitude before ambition. If a flood struck in 2025, survivors would face the same choice, to raise altars or to rebuild Babel. The pre-finale is serenity after storm. Pain gives way to hope. Loss turns into gratitude. Fragile humanity is invited to begin again, but only in covenant with the Creator. Without Him, the cycle repeats. With Him, the story renews. If you've read this far, you're walking that dry ground emerging from the waters. The Ark is no distant myth. It is a reality alive in those who believe. But the journey isn't over. Next comes the epic finale. Deep reflections, final revelations, words that will thunder in your soul. Brace yourself for the last act. The flood has always been more than history. It is an eternal metaphor of humanity's fragility against divine sovereignty. When waters rise, they don't just swallow cities, they expose hearts. Humanity, stripped of its illusions of control, realizes life was never truly ours to command. That is the essence of judgment, to remind us we are not gods, that our science, politics, empires, and technologies are fragile before the breath of the Creator. Yet even in judgment there is promise. There is always a rainbow after the storm, always a sign God has not abandoned creation. This is the paradox of the flood, destruction and renewal intertwined. If a flood came in 2025, what would it reveal about us? Perhaps that despite our progress, we repeat the same failures. Pride, apathy, worship of self. But it would also reveal seeds of faith still alive, small, resilient, hidden in the chaos. Survivors would not only be those in shelters, but those carrying an altar within. The true ark is not wood, but obedience. It is not frozen on Ararat, but alive in every soul willing to trust. Salvation has always been nearer than we thought. We've simply lacked the eyes to see. And maybe this is the final word. The flood is not past, nor only future. It is present, echoing across generations, calling us to awaken. What drowns us is not water, but emptiness. What destroys us is not rain, but purposelessness. What condemns us is not the flood, but the refusal to hear the voice that since Noah's day still calls, enter the ark. The epic finale of the flood is not destruction, but invitation. To recognize that when all seems lost, there is always a new beginning. For God does not write endless tragedies, He writes stories of rebirth. What began as a question, what if Noah's flood happened in 2025, ended as a revelation? The flood never left. It lives in our crises, our emptiness, our pride. We discovered it isn't just water that drowns us, but arrogance, indifference, and lack of purpose. The journey showed the ark is not some relic frozen on Ararat, but an eternal invitation to refuge in faith, hope, and obedience. If a new flood came today, who would be saved? The answer lies not in bunkers, wealth, or science, but in hearts willing to listen to God's voice. Now the challenge is yours. Each chapter has been a drop on your conscience, each reflection a wave breaking your certainties. But one question remains: what ark are you building? The ark of mockery, built of doubt and pride, or the ark of faith, forged in eternal values? Maybe this is the time to pause, to look within, to ask what really matters. Because 2025's flood may never come as water, but it already comes daily in the invisible flood of the soul. Only the prepared will endure. If this message stirred you, don't leave in silence. Hit like. It's free and helps this reach others. Comment amen or share your prayer. We are praying with you. Share this with someone who needs it today. Save this video. It may be your rescue tomorrow. And subscribe, because here you never walk alone.